The gray morning sky mirrored Emily's mood as she stirred her coffee absently at her small kitchen table. It was a weekday ritual, preparing herself for another long day at the firm where she worked tirelessly as a project manager. Outside, the sounds of city life hummed in the background, but Emily felt oddly disconnected. This wasn't just another day. Today, she would be presenting her designs for the Hudson Project, a task she had worked tirelessly on for weeks. Her fingers hovered over the polished surface of her portfolio as she mentally rehearsed her points. The Hudson Project wasn't just another assignment, it was a chance to prove herself. Despite her attention to detail and dedication, she couldn't shake the persistent voice of doubt planted by her boss, Mr. Simmons. Simmons had a way of making everyone in the office feel small, and Emily was no exception. She chose her sharpest blazer, meticulously combed her hair, and checked her notes one last time before heading out. The office was a sleek, modern space with glass walls that reflected the unrelenting pace of the corporate world. As she stepped into the elevator, Emily steeled herself for the day ahead, hoping to finally break through Simmons' cold exterior with her presentation. The conference room buzzed with energy as the team gathered for the meeting. Simmons, seated at the head of the table, exuded his usual air of superiority. Emily took a deep breath and began presenting her designs. The room fell silent as the screen lit up with visuals that showcased her creativity and precision. Her voice was steady, each word carefully chosen, but then Simmons interrupted. "Emily, this is ambitious," he said, leaning back in his chair, his eyes narrowing. "But did you even consider the cost implications? Or is this just another idealistic pitch that ignores reality?" The words hit her like a slap. A few colleagues exchanged uneasy glances, but no one spoke. Emily swallowed hard, trying to maintain her composure, but the humiliation was palpable. Simmons smirked slightly, satisfied with his critique. Simmons was a man who thrived on control. His reputation as a perfectionist preceded him, and while his strategic acumen was undeniable, his leadership style left much to be desired. Emily had watched as colleague after colleague wilted under his scrutiny, their confidence eroded by his relentless critiques. For Emily, every interaction with Simmons felt like walking on a tightrope. Even the smallest misstep could result in a sharp rebuke. His comments were rarely overtly cruel, but they carried a patronizing undertone that left no doubt about his opinion of her capabilities. "Your work is adequate," he once said, his tone flat, "but it lacks the depth I expect from someone in your position." The words had stayed with her, replaying in her mind during late nights at the office when she questioned whether she would ever truly succeed under his leadership. Late one evening, long after most employees had left for the day, Emily sat alone in the office, fine-tuning the final details of her designs. The soft glow of her desk lamp cast long shadows over the room, and the hum of the air conditioner was the only sound. She was lost in thought when a familiar voice broke the silence. "Still here?" Liam, one of her few allies at the firm, leaned against the doorframe. "You're going to wear yourself out." Emily smiled weakly. "Just trying to make this perfect." Simmons doesn't exactly hand out compliments, so I figured I'd give him one less reason to criticize. Liam walked over, his expression serious. "You know he's impossible to impress, right? But for what it's worth, I think your designs are brilliant. Don't let him make you doubt yourself." His words were a rare balm to her battered confidence. For the first time in weeks, she felt a small flicker of hope. The next morning, Emily arrived at the office with a renewed sense of purpose, ready to refine her presentation based on the feedback from the meeting. She opened her email and froze. The subject line read, "Hudson Project Leadership Update." Clicking it open, she felt her stomach drop. Simmons had reassigned the project to Marcus, an ambitious but inexperienced colleague whose networking skills far outweighed his actual expertise. Emily reread the email, her disbelief giving way to anger. She had poured her heart into this project, sacrificing countless hours, only for it to be handed off without so much as a conversation. Whispers spread quickly through the office. "Did you hear Marcus is leading Hudson now?" one colleague murmured. What happened with Emily? Marcus, basking in the attention, made no effort to hide his gloating. "Don't worry, Emily," he said with a smug grin. "I'll make sure this project stays on track. You'll still get a mention somewhere, maybe." The humiliation was almost unbearable. Emily clenched her fists under her desk, swallowing her frustration as she tried to focus on the tasks Simmons had reassigned her, tasks far beneath her skill level. That evening, Emily met Liam at a quiet cafe. Over steaming cups of coffee, she vented her frustrations, her voice heavy with exhaustion and defeat. "You know," Liam said after listening intently, "maybe it's time to consider other options. Simmons is never going to see your worth. You deserve to work somewhere, anywhere, that values what you bring to the table." His words struck a chord. For the first time, Emily allowed herself to imagine a future beyond the confines of the firm. That weekend, Emily found herself in the comforting kitchen of Sarah, a retired executive she had met years ago at a networking event. Sarah's career was legendary. She had shattered glass ceilings and was known for mentoring women in male-dominated industries. Emily poured out her struggles, her voice thick with frustration. "I don't know what else I could have done. Every time I try to prove myself, Simmons finds a way to cut me down." Sarah listened intently, her sharp eyes never leaving Emily's face. After a long pause, she spoke. "Emily, you're playing a game where the rules are stacked against you. You can either keep fighting for scraps or step out of their shadow and create something entirely your own." The words hit Emily with the force of a revelation. Could she really leave behind the security of her job to start something new? The idea both terrified and thrilled her. For the next few days, Emily couldn't stop thinking about Sarah's advice. She stayed up late researching how to start a consulting firm, poring over financial plans and brainstorming potential clients. Her mind raced with possibilities, but doubt crept in just as quickly. Her savings were modest, and the prospect of failure loomed large. Every time she hesitated, though, Sarah's words echoed in her mind, "You're capable. The only question is whether you're brave enough." One morning, as the sunlight streamed through her apartment windows, Emily made her decision. She opened her laptop, typed up her resignation letter, and printed it out. Her hands trembled as she signed her name, but for the first time in years, she felt a flicker of control over her future. When Emily handed her resignation to Simmons, his reaction was as patronizing as she had expected. "So, you're giving up?" he said, leaning back in his chair with a smirk. "I hope you realize how competitive the real world is. Good luck surviving out there." Emily met his gaze with a calm she didn't entirely feel. "Thank you for the opportunity," she said evenly. "I'll take my chances." As she left his office, whispers followed her down the hallway. Some colleagues expressed quiet admiration for her boldness, while others dismissed her decision as reckless. Emily tried to ignore it all, focusing instead on the road ahead. Emily's final days at the firm were bittersweet. Packing up her desk, she felt a pang of sadness as she glanced around the office. Despite everything, this place had been a part of her life for years. But as she stepped into the elevator for the last time, a sense of liberation washed over her. "This is just the beginning," she whispered to herself. Setting up her consulting firm was more challenging than Emily had anticipated. She worked from her cramped apartment, the kitchen table cluttered with notes, blueprints, and her laptop. Days were spent drafting proposals, researching potential clients, and attending virtual workshops to sharpen her business acumen. Rejection became a familiar companion. Many clients were hesitant to work with a newcomer, and Emily's savings dwindled rapidly. But she refused to let the setbacks define her. Each rejection fueled her determination, and she reminded herself that every success story started with a struggle. The breakthrough came unexpectedly. One afternoon, as Emily reviewed her dwindling budget, her phone buzzed with an email from a former client at the firm. They had heard about her departure and were impressed by her work on past projects. "We're looking to redesign our office," the email read. "Would you be interested in discussing this further?" Emily could hardly believe it. The meeting was scheduled for the following week, and she poured all her energy into preparing. When the day arrived, she presented her ideas with confidence, blending creativity and practicality in a way that left the client thoroughly impressed. By the end of the meeting, she had secured her first independent contract. The first project was a resounding success, earning Emily glowing reviews and, more importantly, word-of-mouth referrals. Over the next few months, her client list grew steadily, and her consulting firm began to take shape. As she tackled new challenges, Emily felt a renewed sense of purpose. For the first time in years, she was doing work she believed in without the constant shadow of Simmons' criticism. One day, Emily received a call from the CEO of a prominent tech company. "We've heard excellent things about your work," he said. "We'd like to discuss a potential partnership for a major project." Emily's hands trembled as she scribbled down the details. This was the kind of opportunity she had dreamed of: high-profile, demanding, and potentially transformative for her business. Back at her old firm, Simmons' mismanagement was beginning to take its toll. Employee morale was at an all-time low, and several key team members had resigned. The Hudson Project, once touted as the firm's crown jewel, was now a source of embarrassment. To make matters worse, one of the firm's largest clients had terminated their contract, citing dissatisfaction with the company's leadership. Simmons was under immense pressure, his once unassailable authority crumbling around him. Emily was reviewing a proposal for a new client when her phone buzzed. The message was from Liam. "You won't believe this," it read. "The firm is in crisis, and they're looking for outside help to salvage the Hudson Project. I recommended you." Emily stared at the screen, her emotions swirling. Returning to the firm, even as a consultant, felt like stepping back into the lion's den. But the chance to rewrite her story on her own terms was too tempting to pass up. Emily spent the weekend deliberating Liam's message. The idea of returning to the firm that had belittled her was fraught with emotional complexity. On one hand, she wanted nothing to do with Simmons or the toxic environment he had created. On the other, this was an opportunity to demonstrate just how far she had come, and to do so on her own terms. By Monday, her decision was made. She sent a carefully worded proposal to the firm's board, outlining her plan to salvage the Hudson Project. Within hours, she received their reply, "We're eager to discuss further. Can you attend a meeting this Wednesday?" Dressed in her sharpest business suit, Emily walked into the office that had once felt suffocating. This time, she wasn't a subordinate seeking approval. She was a consultant, her expertise sought after by the same company that had doubted her. The boardroom was a sea of familiar faces, but Emily's focus landed squarely on Simmons. His expression shifted from surprise to discomfort as he realized why she was there. Emily began her presentation with the poise and confidence she had cultivated over the past year. Her plan for revitalizing the Hudson Project was both innovative and practical, addressing every issue the project had faced under its current leadership. The Hudson Project requires not just strong design principles but a cohesive strategy that integrates function and form, Emily explained, her voice steady. As she spoke, she noticed board members leaning in, nodding in agreement. Simmons, however, sat stiffly, his face betraying a mix of resentment and unease. By the end of her presentation, the room erupted into applause. One of the senior board members turned to her. "This is exactly what we've been missing. I only regret not recognizing your talent sooner." After the meeting, Simmons lingered behind as the rest of the board exited the room. He approached Emily, his usual arrogance noticeably absent. "I underestimated you," he said, his voice subdued. "You've done impressive work." Emily met his gaze with a calm that belied her emotions. "Thank you," she replied simply. She saw no need to rub salt in his wounds, her success was validation enough. As she left the office, she felt a surge of pride. The girl who had once doubted herself had become a woman who commanded respect. Later that week, Emily received a call from one of the firm's board members. "By the way," he said, "the client that recommended you for this role was none other than the one Simmons lost during the Hudson Project debacle." Emily smiled at the irony. Simmons' mismanagement had driven the client away, and in doing so, had indirectly helped her establish her business. It was a poetic twist that highlighted how far she had come. Emily's successful turnaround of the Hudson Project not only restored the firm's reputation but also opened doors for her consulting business. Several board members referred her to their personal networks, and her client list grew exponentially. Each new project brought fresh challenges, but Emily embraced them with the confidence of someone who had faced adversity and emerged stronger. Back at the firm, Simmons' days were numbered. The board, disillusioned by his leadership, decided it was time for a change. His replacement, a dynamic and collaborative executive, quickly set a new tone, valuing creativity and respect in equal measure. For Emily, the news felt like the final chapter of a story she had long since outgrown. One evening, Emily sat in her home office, surrounded by blueprints, awards, and mementos from her journey. She thought back to her first days at the firm, the humiliation she had endured, and the resilience she had cultivated. Her success wasn't about proving Simmons wrong, it was about proving to herself that she was capable of greatness on her own terms. With her business thriving, Emily launched a mentorship program for young professionals navigating toxic workplaces. One of her ments, Clara, reminded her of herself, a talented but undervalued designer searching for direction. During a mentoring session, Clara confided her doubts. Emily smiled and said, "You have the talent. The only question is whether you have the courage." Clara's eyes lit up, and Emily felt a deep sense of fulfillment. Sarah's advice had come full circle, passed down to the next generation. Months later, Emily stood on stage at a prestigious industry gala, accepting the Innovator of the Year award. The room was filled with applause as she delivered a heartfelt speech about perseverance, resilience, and the power of believing in oneself. In the audience, Sarah watched with pride, her eyes glistening with tears. A few weeks later, Emily walked past the office building where her career had begun. She paused, gazing up at the glass facade that had once symbolized so much frustration and self-doubt. Now, It represented something entirely different, a reminder of how far she had come. With a small, satisfied smile, Emily turned and walked away, her head held high.